Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, our guest is Jean-Luc Wasmer. He's with Triton Digital, and Jean-Luc is one of the architects behind ad insertion that actually works well and programmatic buying for advertisers. It's kind of the future, and Chris Tarr and I and Jean-Luc are going to explore how this works and how to make it work just right for you. Coming up next on TWiRT. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store, with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics, with the Bionic Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. By Nautel, worry-free transmission you can count on with outstanding control, reliability, efficiencies, and Nautel's unmatched 24/7 customer support. Online at nautel.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower. I'm Kirk Harnack, here in the Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee. It's a gorgeous day here in Nashville. We've had some rain, some hot weather, some slightly cooler weather, and it's a wonderful end of the summer day. The beginning today, September 1st, the beginning of meteorological fall. Yes, I know it's not real fall, or it's not the fall that we celebrate coming up, around the 20th or 21st of the month, but it's the beginning of meteorological fall. Meteorologists like me say, okay, fall started September 1st. Yeah, we got to be different. Got to be complicated somehow. Hey, welcome into the show, and we'll introduce our guest in a couple minutes. First, let's bring in our co-host. Chris Tarr is here from Mukwonago, Wisconsin. Chris, welcome in. Good to see you.
Well, thank you. I don't know that we would celebrate the beginning of fall. More like, oh, it's here already. Oh, boy. Actually, fall here is fantastic. So I guess I shouldn't joke. It's actually around here my favorite time of year, with the trees changing and everything else, and with kids going back to school. So my teenage daughter goes back to school tomorrow. So because I work at home, I can't tell you how excited I am for that.
Wait, you guys don't get back to school until September 2nd?
We actually, originally there was the state law was you couldn't go back till after Labor Day.
Oh, okay.
Because historically, because we're a tourism state, a lot of the students were working over the summer at their summer jobs. So they had a law that said you couldn't, you had to do it. So now, they're doing this thing where it's kind of sneaked back a little bit. It's one day before, and then they have a long weekend, and then they go back. So yeah, they end up, now of course they start later and then they get out later. So, we'll have to deal with that.
This is so interesting, because when I was a kid, we would always start right after Labor Day, and that was in Kansas and in Louisiana when I lived there. But here in Tennessee, we don't have child labor. We don't let so
that's unfortunate.
My son went back to school, I want to say August 11th. Wow. Yeah, he's been in for 3
child
weeks.
labor is great. That's the whole reason we have kids. It's for somebody to do the work. Because then I go, I can go to my teenage daughter and say, hey, it's time to clean your room. And she can go, But so we're getting ready for fall here. It's nice for me because, as a working engineer, things start to slow down a little bit in the fall. You have all your projects when the weather's nice, with, getting on towers and doing transmitter installs and stuff like that. And then fall comes and things start to slow down, and you can enjoy a hopefully mostly quiet winter, which is, after this year putting on, I think, 5 or 6 new stations, I'm kind of looking forward to. Oh
yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, Chris, thanks for the report and the school starting report. That's great. And I wish your daughter best of luck in school this year. What year is she in high school?
She's a sophomore now.
Okay. All right. Good deal. Got any more Comic-Cons planned with her?
Actually, I think we're done for the year. Then the next one I think is February. So, we just went to one a month and a half ago, I think. So that's also starting to wind down for the year.
Good deal. Well, I haven't been to one all year, so nobody's invited me.
Oh, you gotta go. You'd be great at these.
Well, Chris, I called you earlier and mentioned to you our guest today. And our guest, first of all, he's got such a cool name. It's just great to have a guy on as our guest, and his name is Jean-Luc. Ladies and gentlemen, Jean-Luc Wasmer. Hey, Jean-Luc, good to see you. How are you?
Hi everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm doing good.
Hey, oh darn, I'm hearing some more of that strange clicking in your mic. But tell you what, stick with us. We'll do a commercial break in a minute. Jean-Luc, you work with the guys at Triton, and you have an engineering mind. You're kind of an architect for how a lot of this stuff works. Give us a little elevator pitch about what you do for Triton and how that helps people who are streaming with Triton.
Yeah, absolutely. So indeed, I have an engineering background. I studied computer science, a bit of electronics. And when I started working for Triton in 2011, I was hired as an architect. So I was doing less programming at that point in my life. I'd done it for 10 years, and then I was more like designing systems. And as Triton evolved and we kind of restructured and working differently, I moved into more like partnerships and working with integrating other technology with the Triton technology. So I still have a bit of an architecture role, but also oversee integrations for Triton.
Good deal. And one of the things that we're going to do is I've always been really curious to try to understand how the science or the techniques of ad insertion have gotten better. I think when this whole idea, maybe 10, 12, maybe even 15 years ago, was getting going, the whole idea of ad insertions in a stream, there was a lot of clunkiness to this and a lot of ways that it didn't work well. And you're going to help us understand why nowadays this ad insertion is better than it's ever been for audio quality, for audio consistency. So, you don't lose listeners because they have to crank the volume control up and down, but also that listeners tend to get served ads that they're interested in now instead of ads that they're not interested. It's getting away from a broadcast model and more of a one-to-one model. So Jean-Luc will be here for this hour telling us about how that works and indeed why it's a better experience and how it puts broadcasters who have a stream onto the same level of offering messaging, advertising to listeners, how that we can do that in a way that's comparable to how our competitors like Spotify and Pandora can do it, giving people ads that are tailored for them, so they're not hearing ads that just don't apply to them at all. So that is coming up. Chris Tarr is here. I'm here, and I want to tell you real quick, remind you about the Nautel webinars. They're starting back up again in September. Now, there's not going to be one next Tuesday, but the following Tuesday, which is September, I want to say the 13th. Is that right? September 13th, Nautel is going to be having their next Transmission Talk Tuesday. And I sure would like you to go register for this. You can go to nautel.com/webinars and click on Transmission Talk Tuesday. You can see there are 3 of them that are scheduled for September. The first one, September 13th, is called Repair or Replace, How to Decide. And that's a tough decision sometimes, whether to repair or replace something. And then the next Tuesday, it's Getting Ready for Winter. And the next Tuesday, it's Proudly Made in Maine. And I don't know if I'm talking about lobsters or what. Probably transmitters, but we'll check that out. You should go to nautel.com/webinars and click on Transmission Talk Tuesday and get yourself registered. By the way, it's easy to register. You register for one, you can click on the next ones. They kind of autofill. And I like the way Nautel does this, getting you registered and reminding you the day before and reminding you 1 hour before Transmission Talk Tuesday. Remember, I call it a webinar. It's in the webinars page from Nautel. It's really a roundtable discussion. You get to participate. If you have a question, if you want to relate something that you're doing that works well, or, hey, warn people about something that didn't work so well, you can do that with Jeff Welton as the host of Transmission Talk Tuesday. Thanks a lot, Nautel, for sponsoring the show and for making these incredibly good educational roundtables available to us. Okay, Chris Tarr is here and Jean-Luc Wasmer is here. Jean-Luc, we got a number of graphics to jump into, and I guess, well, to kind of set this up before we go to our first graphic, Jean-Luc, you gave me a little bit of history of how this spot insertion started. And, a lot of us are familiar with downstream spot insertion. we've seen it on cable systems. I used to see it back in the 1980s when we had tape machines doing spot insertions on cable systems. And that was usually pretty terrible. The audio was wrong. The video level was wrong. And of course, it was an ad that was poorly produced. That was pretty much your guarantee with cable ad insertions. But the idea carries forward that you've got programming that may go out to a very large audience, but you want to specifically, or more specifically, target the people listening with ads that apply to them. That you're not, if you've got a regional advertiser, it's not going out all over the country. It's just going to the region. So anyway, I don't mean to let too much of the cat out of the bag, and I'm sure you can explain it better. What is the purpose of this kind of technology to enable this kind of advertising, Jean-Luc?
And before I explain the evolution of the industry, I want to mention that in the US, we were in a very interesting and unique position 10 years ago for two different reasons. The first one is that there's royalties on talent, on the talent who record the ads, and typically the talent who record the ads for broadcast. They only paid for that local market. So for a station to air the ad on a stream that could be heard outside the market causes an issue, or they would have to make sure that those talents get paid. So there was an issue there, and they didn't want those local ads to be broadcast or streamed outside of a market. So there was this issue. And the second point is that in the US, streaming and broadcast doesn't get measured together. So Arbitron, now Nielsen, measures broadcast, and they don't include streaming. So essentially, they can do whatever they want with the stream because they don't owe that inventory to the advertisers. So it put the US broadcaster in an interesting position where they were compelled to do ad replacements. And if we go to the first slide, the one that's number one, here I'm kind of showing how we went from simulcast to, so simulcast essentially was replacing broadcasting the same ads on the streaming, and very fast this went to station ad replacement. And essentially there was a box at the station that would detect when the break would start, and then they would have different type of ads for that. And then from that point on, we went to digital. And when we mean digital, we don't mean the opposite of analog. Digital is kind of a term in the advertising industry that really means online. So it's kind of an ad for each different user, right? And then
I'm glad you explained that, because so often I hear people in your line of work or in ad agencies talk about digital. And I think I know what they mean, but you explained that we're not talking about digital audio versus analog audio. We're talking about ads that are delivered online instead of ads that are delivered over the air.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So what's not digital is pretty much like a spot. It's like what we sell on broadcast, what I show here in the unit sold. It's a spot. So everyone hears the same ad. So whether we do a simulcast of a broadcast or we replace the ads for the streamers, it's still a spot model. And when we go into a digital mode realm, then it's like what we call impressions.
Let's go back to that graphic. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to clarify that. That was a good thing for me to learn about what we mean by digital in this realm of online ad sales. Okay.
Yeah, so the evolution went from simulcast to station ad replacement to digital. So that's when we replaced the ad for every single user, and then the next step was to go to programmatic, which we'll talk a bit more later on. And here I was trying to show, the playback of the ad in the first two cases is happening at the station. When we go to digital and programmatic, this happens it can happen at the player level, so in the device of a user, like kind of what YouTube does. But a lot of broadcasters prefer to use SSAI, which stands for service-side ad insertion. And that means that the ad is inserted directly into the stream that the user gets from a device. So we can also talk about that. It allows a lot of features when we do SSAI.
Server-side ad
again,
insertion. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm. I think that is very unique, or maybe 10 years ago, this was very unique to radio stations doing SSAI, because the difference with other media is that broadcasters don't really see the end device as something they should own, so they didn't really care about users going on their website, for instance. So you have all those aggregators saying, okay, you can listen to all the radio stations in the world. And those platforms, they don't really care about the monetization of that broadcaster. So the only way the broadcaster can monetize the stream is by making sure the ad is inserted in the stream. So that was the main purpose for doing SSAI.
Gotcha. And now, does SSAI, does that technology depend on the end listener listening maybe with an app from the broadcaster, so the broadcaster has this relationship? They kind of maybe even know who that is, or at least they know about that person? Or
no, that's the beauty of SSAI.
Yeah.
That's the beauty. It doesn't rely at all on any end device support. There's no SDK. Okay. There's no so if you listen on let's say a bigger creator here in the US would be TuneIn, for instance. You can go to TuneIn and listen to streams from many different broadcasters, and as long as they do SSAI, then those broadcasters can control the ads that TuneIn listeners will be getting, because TuneIn is not then responsible for doing that. And this is different from the client-side model, and that's typically what YouTube does. So if you go on YouTube, you watch a video, the video will pause, and the player of the website or on the app will then make a call to an ad server to get the ad. So it needs to be instrumented to be able to do that. So that's why SSAI allows you to not have to do that. And nowadays, a lot of broadcasters are trying to get the users to come onto the website or onto the apps. But we still have this issue because now we have like smart speakers, connected devices like set-top boxes, and those things are not under the control of a broadcaster. So again, SSAI is very useful in those cases. So that's the main reason why SSAI is happening.
And on that same graphic, Suncast, was there the stuff at the bottom? I'm not sure if we talked about that yet.
So the stuff on the bottom, I think it's going to be more when we're going to go into deep dive into the programmatic stuff. So we can come back to the slide later on for that. Okay, good deal. All right, so we're learning a little bit about the technology involved. Tell you what, let me take a quick break, but before we do, Jean-Luc, can you kind of give us a little tease as to what we'll be learning about next? What technology or what part of the chain here are we going to be learning about when we come back from this ad? So we'll be talking about SSAI, going into deep dive into that, and then we can talk about programmatic and all the different variations of programmatic that exist.
Okay, all right, because there's different ways to get this done, and I'm kind of blown away by all the options that are available to people who make content, in this case, radio stations, and to the people who buy advertising or messaging or impressions on that content. Chris Tarr is here. I'm sorry, Chris, I haven't let you get a word in edgewise. I apologize. We're going to hear from Broadcast Bionics about the Bionic Studio, which is a great way to make your content as good as it can possibly be, maybe better than you thought about. We'll be right back after this.
Welcome to the Bionic Studio. The Bionic Studio brings all audience interaction to the fingertips of a production team in radio, TV, and podcast. Our workflow-led system is working 24/7 around the world for small broadcasters and national and international networks. Our telephony module, Bionic Talk Show, allows cost-effective centralization, remote operation, scalability, and resilience across an entire network of stations, but at the same time is used in single-studio self-op environments. Social media curation and activity is now considered a broadcast-critical part of programming. Bionic Social means the studio isn't overwhelmed with a wall of interaction from an ever-growing number of social platforms. We combine SMS, MMS, and email together with a speech-to-text service for listeners using smart speakers. We enable studio teams to curate, filter, and display all platforms in one place, and post text, images, and video content to multiple platforms in one operation. Effortless collection of video content with Bionic Director has helped position some of the world's most successful stations as leaders in viral content, generating appointments to listen and free marketing via retweets and shares. Bionic Contest enables end-to-end tracking of on-air competitions, live reads, and prizes. These could be on-air contests, automated SMS entry, or online. Anywhere, and Skype TX for Radio brings high-quality audio and video contribution into the studio with ease. No need for dedicated PCs to run different applications. Everything is controlled within the Bionic Studio UI, and incoming connections are visible to users along with all other platforms. Our codec integration enables connection, algorithm configuration, and directory to a wide range of IP and ISDN codecs. The Bionic Studio, a unique suite of products designed to enable your talent to work smarter.
The Bionic Studio from Broadcast Bionics at bionics.co.uk. Check them out. You can go to their website and check them out and see an amazing array of products, including their Camera One system, which will automatically switch your cameras in your studio, allowing you to either broadcast live or to make social media clips that really work well and go viral and get your listeners talking about you and sharing. Thanks to Broadcast Bionics for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, I'm here with Chris Tarr and Jean-Luc Wasmer, and Jean-Luc is here from Triton Digital, and Jean-Luc is the architect and in charge of partners there at Triton Digital. So, Jean-Luc, you were getting ready to tell us now about. We got some slides that help explain the technicalities of kind of how this works. So where would you like to take us in our journey?
So this is what Triton offers. I'm sure other vendors would have the same kind of thing. So we essentially have three different type of modes where you can do an overlay, which means that when the broadcast ad starts, we can just put a online or digital break, and then when this will end, we'll just catch up wherever the program is, and we may be cutting a bit into the next song or whatever. The mode what we call replace, as you can see at the end of the online break for the user, we will sync back. So what we call the sync point. We will sync back to where the cue point for the end of break, the broadcast end of break was. But what that means is there's a bit of a delay, and now the user is going to be maybe a few seconds. Maybe up to 30 seconds delayed with the broadcast feed. And the third mode is a pure insert, where we just keep a broadcast break, but we just add extra ads. And this is actually a mode that very few broadcasters use, but it's available. Okay. And when I was talking about buffering, and if we look at the slide number 3, I'll show a bit of an example. On the top, you have a broadcast content. In green, you have the breaks. And then as we detect that break, what we offer to the streaming users is what's below, and each user will have a different variation of that. But we start inserting ads. What happens is when we get the signal that the station finished the break, that's when we stop inserting ads. But we may be in the middle of playing an ad. So we're going to wait for that ad to finish and then stitch back the content. And that's where you get a bit of a delay. And here's an example where maybe there's like 25 seconds. All right. What happens is we're actually going to catch up a delay on the next break. So as you see, as the next broadcast break starts, we're going to wait, and then essentially we're going to do the same thing, start inserting ads, so that delay doesn't accumulate break after break. It just grows and shrinkens a bit. So maximum delay would be a full ad, let's say, and it can go down to almost 0. So that's how we do on the buffering side. And then the next slide. Yep. Sorry. Go
But
ahead.
before we switch slides, a couple things that I want to note here. So this is I've really taken the time to look at this now. On the lower line here, of course, that's the stream that as it goes out, and it looks
Yes.
like on the third ad, we started at the far left. The third ad started, and we got about 5 seconds into it, and then the station ended their break, and so you are buffering the station's program audio for 25 seconds. And when your inserted ad gets over with, you smoothly go back into the station's program, now delayed 25 seconds. And then I see on the next ad break, your two ads add up to a bit less time than the station's break. And we get that down to 19 seconds of buffering. But overall, so the stream is likely to be delayed at any given time from, almost zero up to the length of an ad, maybe 30, maybe as much as 60 seconds. But anyway, it's not going to be several minutes. So that's okay. Now I'm finally getting to visualize how this works. And
yes, and I'm only showing like 2 or 3 ads in that example just to make it simpler to understand. But obviously this would be over maybe a bit more ads, right? But yes, it's correct. And again, the example would be per user. So each user would have a different experience and being delayed differently from some other user. But the great thing is that we catch up at the delay of the next break, and then it doesn't accumulate.
This before and one more note here. This is really interesting. The whole and there are some radio networks that kind of operate this way. Some just-in-time networks where, let's say, there's a morning show called Murphy, Sam, and Jody, and my radio stations we use that show at 2 different of my radio stations in different markets with different formats. So there's different lengths of the songs aren't even the same on the 2 stations, and yet we're always able to play their next break and their next bit, their next comedy bit or informational bit. And it just all works out really well with the automation systems also keeping tabs on, when to play what. It's interesting that if we, here in broadcast, we're so used to being live, really live, hitting that news at the top of the hour and all those kind of things. And when we no longer have that exact constraint, when we have foreknowledge of what's coming because we're delaying it, so in a sense we have foreknowledge, and we can also adjust what we do in terms of timing to always on average get our output pretty much back in line with what's coming in. That gives us a flexibility that for me as an engineer and even as a radio programmer, it's a little hard to imagine. It takes a little bit of wrapping my head around this to think about, this does work out in the long run just fine. And it doesn't matter that my stream is delayed 5 seconds or 35 seconds. It doesn't matter. So I really appreciate you coming on the show here and helping me wrap my brain around this concept that it's really okay to have this different buffering going on so that we can add or not add elements as needed. Chris, you look like you want to say something.
Well, the one thing that I know that we did add at Intercom, now Odyssey, is we did add in our contest rules that if you're relying on the stream for a call-in contest or a time-sensitive contest, that listening to the stream, we can't guarantee that you're in real time because of that delay. So that, I mean, that's just a small issue, but there is something like that sometimes where you have to kind of keep that in mind, that there may be a 30-second delay. So if they say call now, be caller 10, you may not be able to get in to do that, because by the time you get the information and get in, it could be a minute after the first caller came in. So there is that. But you're right. I mean, it's a whole different paradigm, and HD radio has changed that as well, because you're not in real time there either. There's a delay. Yeah. So I think, the talent has kind of gotten into the just trust in the system and let it happen. Just focus on what you're doing at the moment, and all of these different technologies with different delays and different buffers, it'll all work out. You don't even need to think about it. Just do what you're going to do, and it will all just fall into place. And so, I think, the fact that we have to delay streams to make all this work is just fine, because, hey, nothing in broadcast is real time anymore on the listener end.
Right.
And that's the reason we have different modes, by the way, and if we go back to that slide number 2, where we see the different insertion modes, the first one was the pure overlay, where we say, hey, we don't care when we're going to stitch back to the broadcast feed. We're just going to stitch whenever we're done playing, and that doesn't introduce additional delays, but at the expense of maybe, like not a very nice transition. Because when the ad we're playing finishes, we may be cutting into the next piece of content, and there are some stations that say, I want that because I'm a sports station and I don't want my users to be delayed with the results, or so that happens.
I was just going to say that, on the stations where we've been doing local sports, that would be the mode we'd go into, because we'd much rather have, something, the first part of a break cut off by a few seconds than have it delayed over time to where, the scores are coming in faster than we're getting them out over the air. So, there are definitely times when you'd want to do that, at the cost of the elegance of having the solution work kind of seamlessly. That would be one situation. But again, that's something we deal with HD radio. A lot of stations turn off the diversity delay during the games, so that, or even use the sports flag in HD where the HD carrier shut off and you go straight to analog, just because you want to have that information reported in real time.
All right.
And
yeah, go ahead, John. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say something that's really important at the base of all that is those cue points, right? So we talk about the cue points as the metadata we get from the playout system, and if that is not properly set up, then we cannot do that job in the back end. So, I mean, the cue points is useful in now playing, like so that users can see, like the RDS system on broadcast. But it's also used in digital to show on the players what the artist is. But we also use that for the ad insertion triggers on our end. So I think that's something maybe we could talk about is how good those cue points have to be for that ad insertion to work properly.
All right, let's move ahead. We could go a lot longer than an hour on this. But what's our next graphic here? What we're going to look at?
So the next graphic is just showing different types of ad insertion that we support. So here, provided that we got all the cue points, we can essentially replace the entire break. This is what that case one is showing here. But we can also go and just replace one ad, or we can have ads that we don't replace. So ad replacement doesn't have to be all or nothing. All right, it could be a full break. It could be a partial break where there's specific ads that we say we don't need to replace. And we don't need to go into all those cases, but it's just to show that if we do get all those cue points from the playout system, then we can do whatever we want on the server side. You can see that is in the case number 5 here, where we insert that green ad, replaces the first ad, and then we keep the second ad. So it's very flexible. We can do pretty much what we want as long as we get those proper cue points from the playout system. And talking about a cue point, what's very important for us is the alignment of a cue point. So if we look at what creates an issue with the alignment, it could be many different things. It could be the a profanity system in place. Nowadays, those things are pretty good in delaying the cue point the same way they delay the audio. So that's not so much an issue. An audio processor. Sometimes there's configuration in the playout system, or it could be because there's an old computer that's where the stream is going through. And it's funny to mention that, but it does happen that we have sometimes customers that come with a very old computer, and we tell them, no, you got to upgrade that computer because it's going to create problems. And the last one would be the network path. So there's different things we can do. So if most of those issues are going to create a fixed delay between the cue point and the audio, and if we look at slide number 5, or is it, I'm not sure if it's 6. Sorry, 6. It's our station manager software that we provide, but typically we're the ones setting it up, but the station engineers can also go into that software. And that tool shows where you see at the top, we see that line that shows where we receive a cue point, and we show that waveform to help move that cue point and insert a bit of a delay to match the audio. So this is very easy when you have a fixed delay. The issue is when the delay changes, and that again, it can be caused by a computer that's not up to date or network path. And to avoid that issue, what we do at Triton is we provide that software directly at the station level. It gets installed at the station. So we bundle together the audio and the cue points, and we align them together at the station level to avoid any internet delay or anything like that. And then we carry both in a FLV format to our CDN. And that way we can have a cue point timestamp down to the millisecond. And that gets done at the station level. So when it hits our CDN, there's no out of sync issues. No matter if the packets come in, delayed or whatever, everything will be timestamped. So that's why we provide that software to our customers.
Now, I got to ask you about this. You mentioned this, or you mentioned this yesterday when we chatted. You said you put the audio and the cue points, the metadata, in an FLV format, and I always thought of that as kind of an old-fashioned video format. What is FLV, and how does it keep this aligned for you?
So it's interesting because indeed, every time we mention FLV, people think Flash, and Flash is not supported by browsers, but FLV is not just how Flash was transported. It's also like a container, a valid media container that is very useful for us because unlike, let's say, a shoutcast stream where the metadata can only be sent, it's not that often we can send the metadata, and there's no way to timestamp that metadata. So essentially, wherever that metadata appears in the stream, that's when it's kind of valid in a sense. Whereas with FLV, we can send metadata and at the same time provide a timestamp where it should take effect in a sense. So FLV has greater flexibility for us to do that very precise alignment. So it's really just between our software in the station and our CDN that we use at FLV. And after that, when we deliver to the user, we're going to convert that to an MP3 or an HLS, whatever is needed for the user. And users don't have to deal with an FLV format. That's just internal.
When the audio is in that FLV container, what format is the audio being carried across in? Is it the native MP3, or is it converted to something else?
Yeah, so we can do MP3, we can do AAC. So typically, station will encode in different flavors, at least one MP3 and one AAC. And so we have a choice. So the FLV is just a container. It's like an envelope that carries that encoded audio. It doesn't matter what codec is being used for the audio. It supports any codec.
Okay, and I have, before we take our next break, which we need to quickly, one more question. These cue points that you showed, like in a spot break, if a station will supply you with a cue point at every spot, you have more flexibility, or the station has more flexibility as to what it can sell or not sell. And I'm guessing that you might use the metadata of categories with spots that can be replaced or spots that cannot be replaced. Am I on the right track there in terms of how you guys find out what you can do?
Yeah, that's correct. So most playout systems nowadays are pretty advanced. It may not have been the case 10 years ago, but nowadays we pretty much get all those categories. And if there are specific spots that the station say, well, I don't want to replace that, they will just need to create a new category for that. And then our software at the station, there's a mapping. And then we encode that in a specific cue point going to our servers, and our servers understand, okay, that ad, I cannot replace that ad. So I have to put it back into the stream. Whereas another ad that can be replaced. So all this is possible. And I also mentioned, replacing a full break or specific ads, but we can also do in and out of market. So we can have rules where we say, if a user is in the same market as that station, we don't do ad replacement. So it's kind of a simulcast mode, let's say.
Yeah.
But users coming from a different market, then we do full ad replacement or partial ad replacement. There's so many, possibilities. It's up to the broadcaster to decide what they want to do.
We're going to take a break. Chris Tarr, I'm going to tell you, have you ever had a station owner, Chris Tarr, that said, we're really, really busy on Friday nights. When we had just gone AM stereo on this station in Kentucky, and the owner was always looking for ways to pocket more money. And he said, can we put the county school football game on the left channel and the city school football game on the right channel?
That's right. Just turn your balance over to whichever game you want to hear.
Yeah, for all 12 people in the market who had an AM stereo radio.
Oh, yeah, the good old days.
Why am I hearing two ball games at the same time? I'm confused.
And you're probably at your daytime power because you had PSA, the what is it? The Post Sports Authority. From the PSA.
High power. High power sports authority. As you may have called it. Yeah. Oh gosh.
Yeah, I'm operating under the Post Sunset Sports Authority.
But that's it. That was it. All right. Well, speaking of sports and being a good sport in your studio, Chris, you've got something to tell us about Angry Audio.
I do. Now, everybody knows I'm a working stiff. I, build lots of studios and have over my career. And, an actual scenario came up a while back, and I was thinking about this with Angry Audio. I had a program director come in and say, oh, yeah, by the way, I need you to put in a couple of more headphone jacks because we're starting a new morning show and they're probably going to have guests. What do? You get angry. And I don't mean throwing stuff at the program director, although it would probably be, I would justify it with a request like that. But what I'm talking about is Angry Audio, because you're going to need to get headphones to all of those people now in your studio. And that is not an easy task. In the past, we would, put in a headphone jack and we'd try to wire some kind of volume control into it and, split it all up. That's a lot of work to put in headphone jacks. Well, Angry Audio has this box called the Headphone Gizmo. And this is a box you can plug in. It gives a headphone jack and a volume control. Not only a headphone jack, but two. It gives you the big one and it gives you the little one because, those adapters, they're like gold and they disappear. So you don't even need the adapter. You can take your mini jack and go right into the side. But one of the things I love about Angry Audio gear is look very closely at the design of that box. If you notice, there are no corners on it. Because what happens when you put something like a box underneath a countertop, somebody swings their chair around and gets their knee on there and gashes it wide open. It has happened. I vouch for it. It has happened in cases before. I've seen it. So just the thoughtfulness that goes into the design of this with the rounded edges so that you can put it under a countertop without banging your knee on it. This is a great way to solve a problem. You don't have to roll your own and come up with all these little homebrew pieces to make it all work. You take that one box and you can daisy chain them along with the power. So if you have a headphone amplifier, you can wire it in, to the same feed to everybody and daisy chain those together and everybody gets that feed. However, they can control their own volume and they can also control what kind of headphones they plug in. So just one of those things, again, that's a quick, what do? You get angry when something like this comes up. Don't sweat it. Don't worry about how you're going to make it all work. Don't try to come up with some kind of Rube Goldberg device. Pick up the phone. Go online and get yourself a Headphone Gizmo. One more thing I wanted to add about the folks at Angry Audio and how they think of everything is I got my C4 processor the other day to try out, and, they have this small little adjustment screw inside. What do? They included a little tweaker for it. Those things, again, you're going to have to take that out of my cold dead hands because everybody loses those. But the fact that they thought to ship one out, I thought was fantastic. So again, when these problems come up and you're trying to find a solution, there's a good chance that if you just get angry, your problem's going to be solved for you. angryaudio.com. Check them out. Lots of cool little gadgets for you.
Good deal. Hey, and another cool gadget that we love is this Max Connect. We got somebody here to tell you all about it.
With all of the recent cybersecurity attacks against large corporations, we were looking for a product that would give us the ultimate security at our transmitter sites and as well as with our broadcast equipment. Max Connect fits the bill very well. Its greatest security feature is the fact that it gives you a single static IP address. Using this single static IP address allows us to close hundreds of open ports on our firewalls across the company and restrict access to only the Max Connect IPs. This has greatly reduced our exposure to the World Wide Web and made us much more secure moving forward. It's also given us the ability to expand as needed in a secure fashion.
John Takak of Radio 1 talking about Max Connect Wireless. You can check this out for yourself. Go to maxconnectwireless.com. There's a shorter version. I think it's maxconnect.com. And I know it's spelled funny. There's a link in our show notes if you need that. And there's the website. You can choose your carrier, AT&T, T-Mobile, or Verizon. They also have options in Canada for our Canadian engineers. And this does give you prioritized 4G data at sites that, otherwise may be really hard to get data at. And you also get a fixed IP address, which is really important when you want to hit a transmitter site. It really helps out. Josh Bone, thanks a lot for inventing Max Connect Wireless and getting this service to broadcasters. Years ago, I always kind of thought there might be a way to get this done. Never had time to really investigate it myself. And the late Chris Tobin also, and I also kind of wondered about this, and Josh Bone did it. Yeah, Chris Tarr?
It's another use case for this. Just the other day, actually, I had a translator site, and the DSL went down. And the DSL I use for site control and monitoring and all these things. So what I do, I grab my trusty Max Connect out of the bag, put it in there, and had that running for a couple of days while I got the DSL sorted out. So it's just a great tool to have in your toolbox if you manage these kinds of sites.
And you're smart to carry one with you since they work almost everywhere. I don't know if you remember, but a couple of years ago here in Nashville, Christmas Day, we had a horrible bombing at the AT&T switch facility, old facility that had been just really built out. And like 3 or 4 states worth of 911 calls go through that facility. Anyway, my AT&T fiber was down for several days. Well, I wasn't without internet because I had the Max Connect and I had it on the Verizon network. So that wasn't affected by that. So you never know what's going to happen. Be ready. Hey, thanks a lot to Max Connect Wireless for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech as well as Angry Audio. Okay, let's jump right back into it. Jean-Luc Wasmer with Triton Digital is waiting patiently to take us to the next step. Jean-Luc, and explain the next step in programmatic.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we move to the next topic, just a few notes about what engineers can do to help with the SSAI. And essentially is making sure that the cue points are properly set up, that the playout system is well configured. Also, telling Triton, in our case, or whatever vendor you work with, explain how the setup of a station. Okay, maybe there's a broadcast feed on the morning show or during the day, because that's going to expose different type of cue points we might have to ignore or not. So I think that is crucial into having that whole system work perfectly is getting good cue point and getting them aligned. So these are the two things that are important. All right.
Okay.
So,
and a lot of that, I think, is when you get the engineer whom hopefully may well understand what we're trying to accomplish here technically. And the engineer needs to work with the program director or the production director or the on-air staff who are producing ads. And maybe they're producing some of these at home. And they need to make sure they get the categories right and whatever method they're using for queuing, to start the next ad, those things need to be right. And if we get everybody on board, on the same page, then this system can really work out well. But if there's somebody that's throwing cue points in the wrong place, just like in the old days when we put a sec cue at the end of a cart, right? If one person had a different idea than another person about where that should go, I use the old example of, at the end of a bank ad, it says member FDIC. Well, do you put the secondary cue when you start saying the letter C on FDIC, or do you put it when the audio is just completely gone, or somewhere in between those points. And if you get the whole crew doing it the same way, then it can work out really, really well. And I think that to work with an external company like Triton for this ad insertion, you really got to have this. Everybody has to be on the same page.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So what's next?
So what next would be if we go back to what we were talking before, the evolution. So now we went from simulcast to station ad replacement to digital, and the next step would be programmatic. So the slide, actually, that's our slide I wanted to talk about right now, is the architecture, explaining kind of a high level how things work. And for pure broadcaster, it would be what we call the SSAI content that you see at the top of that diagram. And when you see the on-demand content, that would be more a use case like maybe a Spotify. We do have broadcasters or publishers that don't have an FM stream, but that work with us in that mode, and they directly have their player talk to our ad server. But in the case of a regular radio station that uses a stream and uses SSAI, so server-side ad insertion, the request for the ad comes from the streaming server. So the only thing we see from the device is just a request for a stream, and then the streaming server will be talking to our ad server and say, okay, I need an ad now because I need to replace a broadcast break, and that's where the publisher can traffic a bunch of streaming ads and what we call direct sold. And that's where programmatic comes into play because our ad server can talk to our SSP. And so in programmatic, you have this concept of SSP and DSP. So what that is that on the publisher side, you have the SSP, which means supply side platform, which talks to a bunch of DSPs, which is the not a digital signal processor. It's a really bad acronym. It stands for demand side platform. So all the different agencies or buying desk that work for advertisers will choose a DSP of a choice, and they will connect to the different SSPs. And the SSP is kind of what we call an exchange. That's where they can buy ads from all the different publishers. So the DSPs connect to different SSPs, and that allows buyers to traffic a campaign that's going to span multiple publishers, even on multiple exchanges. So it gives a lot more flexibility to the advertiser or to a buyer working for the advertiser to manage a campaign across multiple publishers. So that is really what programmatic brings. So instead of having that trafficking of a campaign be handled by the publisher, that campaign runs with the advertiser or the buyer working for the advertiser. And so what you see on this slide is all the different DSPs that Triton has integrated. Today we have about 30 different DSPs, and we're adding more every day. Well, maybe not every day, maybe every month. So I think in the next 6 months, we're going to go to maybe about 60 DSPs. So there's hundreds of DSPs out there, but not all of them work in audio. So the ones we integrated are the bigger ones, and the one that have an interest in audio.
So, as a guy that's in audio himself, I got to remind myself, in this case, DSP, demand side platform, and that SSP was supply side platform. And these two things kind of work, inform each other as to what's available, from this publisher, radio station, or this one or this one. And then all these DSPs, these are the, would you call them ad agencies? What would you call that whole group of companies on the right side of that graph?
So the SSP is a platform. The DSP is another platform. So the SSP works for the publisher. That's why it's the supply side. platform, and the DSP works for the buyer side. Now, who uses a DSP? Typically, it can be what we call a trading desk, and that trading desk may work for an agency and may work for an advertiser. So there's a lot of party involved in that model. It's not often that the advertiser itself will use a DSP. It happens. Big advertisers may have their own trading desk. So the trading desk is like the department that is in charge of managing a campaign on a programmatic level. It's the same kind of term that you have in the finance industry, right? So where you have trading desk buying stock and selling stock. It's the same concept. And we use an exchange, right? So the ads are being sold via like an auction. So whoever bids the highest is going to get the chance to play the ad on the publisher. So it mimics the finance industry in a way.
Wow. Chris, did you have any idea that this was going on, that these exchanges are going on? And I think, as Jean-Luc is going to tell us, a lot of this happens at the last minute, maybe the last few seconds before the ad is going to air.
Oh, yeah. No, I knew a lot about it, especially since early on, Google was doing that with the precursor to wide orbit, the Google radio automation. That was one of the things that they were trying to make happen, was to be able to do that on the broadcast side level. So yeah, I'm aware of it, and it's actually it's been good and bad. I think it helps because a lot of the radio salespeople weren't interested in selling digital, so it really was able to take that inventory and get something out of it. Of course, with several middlemen, sometimes you're not getting a lot, but a little is better than zero. So, I think it's definitely a good thing because there's an opportunity there for an additional revenue stream.
Yeah, and so often in broadcast advertising, there's waste that goes on. You're hitting people that aren't interested. You're hitting people of the wrong demographic. You're hitting people in the wrong geographical areas sometimes. I mean, if you're in a tire shop on the west side of a big city and your signal goes everywhere, well, people maybe aren't going to travel 40 miles to your tire shop. Before we take our next break, Jean-Luc, yeah, kind of sum this up into how this plays out really quickly, last minute, and how buyers act and place and ads get placed really at the last minute sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. So unlike broadcast where everything is maybe scheduled ahead of time and every spot is booked at in a specific day part, at least maybe 24 hours before or maybe even more. In digital, everything happens in real time, and we can do that because we can provide the report of the playback right away. So essentially, when someone listens on an app or via website or smart speaker or whatever, as the ad break starts, that's when we make the request to those DSP and say, okay, we need an ad now. And they're going to all bid together. And then we return that ad back to the streaming server. And all this happens within less than a second. It's maybe 500 milliseconds. So that's why we call that protocol OpenRTB, because it stands for real-time bidding. All this happens in real time.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. Gee. Hey, we got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have some final words from Jean-Luc Wasmer and maybe a tip from Chris Tarr. I may have a tip of my own. And we're going to be right back after this word from Vox Pro.
Hey, what's happening? St. John here, coming to you from Command Central, and wanted to tell you about the absolute best partner you can have in radio. I'm talking about, boom, Wheatstone's Vox Pro. Lots of different audio software out there. Why Vox Pro? It's the only software designed to do what we needed to do, which is record, edit, playback in real time. When I say lightning fast, I'm going to show you how fast you can edit stuff up in Vox Pro right now. So literally 3 clicks on the controller, mark left, mark right, everything that gets marked, you hit delete, it goes away. It's literally that fast. So we're going to take this part right here. Boom. From caller 9 to him saying, I'm ready.
5, ready for that secret sound.
Boom. All of that stuff, hit delete, it goes away. Here's your edit.
You are tackling secret sound, caller 9.
I'm ready, St. John.
So one of the best features of version 7, this is awesome. It's effects macros, and you can literally put a chain of effects together so that instead of having to normalize a phone bit and then use noise reduction on it and EQ it and all that, you can literally build a chain. One button, this one's called call right here. I just click that. All of those processes happen instantaneously. Final thing that I love about Vox Pro, and there's so much more to get into, but one of my favorite things, you can load it on a laptop. I've literally done my show from a hotel room in Armenia to the conference room at, this was fun, jury duty. Great thing, no one could tell the difference. Vox Pro makes it totally easy. Telling you, if you're looking for the best on-air partner, call my friends at Wheatstone, ask them about Vox Pro, and you will be glad you did.
You can get Vox Pro from Broadcasters General Store at bgs.cc, or they would love it if you would give them a call. I know it's kind of old-fashioned. Okay, Boomer, give them a call. 352-622-7700 for Broadcasters General Store. 352-622-7700. Go to their website. It'll remind you that their phone number is there at bgs.cc. They've revamped the website. It is better now. Check it out. All right. Thanks a lot, BGS. I'll keep calling you. I promise. Whenever I need to buy something. Broadcasters General Store. All right. We got just a couple minutes left. Jean-Luc, I'm sorry. We have, we've covered some things in depth, and I'm sure we've skipped over a couple things. Is there a final thought or an idea that you'd like to leave our listeners and viewers with that's important in implementing this kind of technology?
I think your show should be 2 hours, not 1 hour, but that's okay.
I've talked to Suncast about that.
So I think one thing I want to mention, and I mean, there was a lot of things I would have liked to talk about programmatic and the different kinds of programmatic, because there's not just one flavor. But if I can leave with one thing, is something that Triton is working on and we're about to release in Q4. And this is programmatic OTA, over the air. So we are going to be launching this product, allowing buyers to buy broadcast ads via a programmatic channel. Because right now, programmatic is only for streams. And we're going to make it possible for programmatic buyers using a DSP to place an ad that will be in real time over the air on FM or AM. So this is a brand new product that we're starting in Q4, and we're super excited about that. That's going to be like a complete revolution, we think, of the way ads are being sold for broadcast.
That is going to be really interesting. And Chris, I realize it's a new world that this is going into, but you know how people get really nervous if the traffic log isn't done, the day before by 3 p.m. or something, right? And now we don't know what the ad that's going to play is until it's time to play the ad.
Oh yeah, there's a service out there where you actually record a 30-second blank file, and there's a trigger, and they have their own server that overlays a commercial over that blank spot. So when you're in the studio, all you hear is 30 seconds of silence while the station plays on the air. So we're getting there. We're definitely getting there.
Oh my goodness. That's an interesting world. Hey, I worked at a TV station that had master control in a different city. Here, I'm doing the weather here in Nashville. Master control is in Atlanta, where they're switching the commercials. We didn't see the commercials. We had no idea what they were. So we could come out of a commercial for an airline with, an airplane crash story. We wouldn't know. So, yeah, but hey, it's an interesting, brave world that we're in. Wow. Jean-Luc, I'd love to have you back. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I was going to say, we've been doing programmatic for 10 years. We were the first to do programmatic audio on streams. And I must say now the industry is really up to speed. So the concept of industry separation and all that stuff is really well understood by DSPs, and the protocol we use. We worked also with the industry to implement those differences, but that don't exist in display, right? So when we came and said we want to do radio streaming, we had to modify those protocols, and now CTV is becoming very, very popular in programmatic, so which is connected TV, and they also have the same needs. So now we get at a point where those protocols are up to speed and they can do those things that broadcasters need So all those things like industry separation, making sure, doing creative review ahead of time, that can happen. But then which ad actually gets played, that the decision can be a real-time decision.
And I remember, I wish we had more time, because you said that there, a publisher, a radio station, can put constraints on what kind of ads they'll accept or not accept, depending, if it's a religious station or a political station of a certain persuasion, or if it's a station meant for kids, whatever it may be, there are constraints, and the broadcaster does have say-so as to what type of buyer or ad is going to play, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what we call the ad quality rules that allow each station to define what they want, the duration of each ad, the kind of category they're okay with, and if we're talking about industry separation, they can decide, do they want just one, let's say, Coke or Pepsi ad within a break, like soft drinks, or are they okay if there's two, but they have to be separated by maybe one ad? So all those rules are possible, and that's what the SSP, that platform we were looking at, that's its role, is to enforce those rules.
Jean-Luc, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Chris Tarr, maybe you have a tip for us, but before you do, Chris turned me on to these Velcro ties, and I found the new use. It's care about your engineer. You see, that means I care about my engineer. So here's what the tie looks like, and even a guy like me, it's so simple. You can just make a little I care ribbon with your Velcro tie.
What's funny is when you posted that meme of you and the Velcro, one of the replies was from one of my coworkers who immediately knew what you were talking about, because she even jumped in and went, "They're tools of the devil, aren't they?" Because she knows that my rule, I yell it all the time: no tie wraps.
No plastic ties. No plastic
tie wraps. Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
You have a quick tip for us? We got about a minute.
I do. And this one, it may be actually pretty obvious. It may be simple, and many of you may go, yeah, duh. But it's something that actually makes life easy for some of my coworkers. And that is, if you have multiple sites, set the Wi-Fi SSIDs and passwords to be identical. And that way, when somebody puts in their password for the first site, any of your sites that they walk into, their Wi-Fi automatically connects and works. That wasn't the case when I first started with the stations here. And it's interesting now that I have that done. I had one site where that wasn't the case. And I got a call from the coworker in charge saying, "Hey, why isn't my Wi-Fi connecting?" And I said, "Oh, that's still on a different." "Well, can you change it so that it just works like everywhere else?" So just a real handy tip there. If you have multiple sites, be sure to take a look at your Wi-Fi access points, give them the same SSID and password. And especially if you have people that travel from site to site, they will love you for it.
That is, Chris, you have made my afternoon. And you know why? Because finally you've put out a tip. It's a really great tip, and it's something that I'm already doing at all my sites. How about that?
Hey, all right.
Well, it's actually Larry Fuzz's idea. He said, "Kirk, can't you make all the Wi-Fis the same?" I said, "Pretty good idea. I guess I can." And we also have a private Wi-Fi and a guest Wi-Fi, and they're I think they're the same. Yeah.
Yeah, you should definitely these days have a private or a public Wi-Fi as well that doesn't see your actual network. Nothing drives me more nuts than people giving out our private Wi-Fi password, and they can see everything on our network. So it's easy enough to do it. It's easy enough to configure so that the private Wi-Fi, or the public Wi-Fi rather, just sees the internet. So there's no reason not to do that.
All right. Well, we got to go. We're going to have a very short goodbye here. Jean-Luc Wasmer, thank you for joining us and helping us to understand programmatic and how engineers should be involved in making that work right. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for inviting me.
All right. Good to meet you, too. And Chris Tarr, good to see you, buddy. I hope to see you next week. Next week, we're going to have Mark Persons on. And I think you got the word, Chris. We're going to pre-record the show on Tuesday.
Yep.
If you can be there. All right. Good deal. All right, folks. Thank you for joining us This Week in Radio Tech. Hey, see our advertisers. Give them a call. Talk to them. Buy their products. It really helps us out. Thanks so much to Suncast for producing our show today. And thanks to Andrew Zarian, the founder of this network, the GFQ Network. Guys from Queens. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.